it's me, Dom, the WiiReferee, a channel dedicated to providing you a chance to find out what's the difference between the good stuff on the Nintendo Wii and what is just simply shovelware. This system is celebrating its 15th anniversary this November, and with almost 1,600 titles, physical titles, spread across the various formats being NTSC, PAL, and Japan, there is a lot to choose from. And as I've said, the console has a bit of a reputation as being a platform for shovelware. And I think this isn't a fair assumption. But for most people, their first exposure to the Nintendo Wii was this game right here, Wii Sports. And for a lot of people, myself included, their very first exposure was Wii Sports Bowling. So that's why this particular episode, our first inaugural episode, is going to be devoted to the game of Wii Sports Bowling and all the various games that came out on the console that you could play bowling. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into talking about the highs and lows of the various games, starting of course with the original. Wii Sports Bowling is, in my opinion, a perfect game, pun intended, because it has perfect controls that practically anybody can pick up and play within moments. It's not a game that requires a lot of rote muscle memory or button mashing to master. In fact, my own retired age father was able to pick the game up immediately and start enjoying it right out of the box. And this is what I think was a big draw for a lot of people. And it wasn't a big surprise that other companies were quick to pump out their own versions of Wii Bowling. But the question is, are these as good or even better than the original? So when it comes to the good, the bad, and the ugly of Wii Sports Bowling, the first I've already mentioned, which is the ease of play. The controls were super simple. They could be picked up and understood by anybody, even someone who didn't have a lot of experience with video games. Another great feature was my ability to design a digital avatar in the form of my Mii. And the software they used for the creation of the Miis was very robust and had a lot of customizability in designing something that resembled you or some facsimile of you. The unfortunate reality, though, was that these Miis were a bit cartoonish, and some people felt that didn't really sit well with them. They wanted something a little bit more realistic. Me personally, I loved it, but I can see where some people had problems. Another issue is the game didn't have a huge amount of replayability, despite the fact that it's probably the game I've played the most on the Wii because of its great user party play features. The ability to just pick up with a group of friends and immediately start playing. Essentially, the only unlockable in the game was that if you rolled either a perfect score or a near perfect score, you would actually get the option to have a gold ball that you could roll with. But ultimately, the game was very simple. You know, it's a game of bowling after all. But there was no career mode, and there was no differing bowling lanes. There were no features that, like trick shots or anything like that. It was a very simple 10-pin bowling game. But its elegant simplicity, in my opinion, is what sets it apart as the gold standard that we're going to measure every single game in this review. So the first game I want to talk about is the AMF Pin Busters. Now this game is the first bowling game to come out after Wii Sports, and it had a few interesting features. First one that was striking me is the fact that there were 7 unique play environments. Of course, these are just skins of different bowling alleys, but they did add something to the game that you didn't inherently have with Wii Sports Bowling. It also had 8 unique playable characters, but I can't really discern if any of them had any sort of unique advantage over the other. They certainly didn't have any sort of power moves. They just moreover had interesting animations that would go along with if they bowled a strike, or if they got a spare, or if they threw a gutter ball. Some of them are really stereotypical. The one that really strikes out in my mind, of course, would be the drill sergeant and also the street character named Big Money. Both characters were kind of offensive, just in my opinion anyway. There were some mini games, but they are god-awful. I would not recommend. And the only thing worse than the mini games were the controls themselves. They don't really play anything like Wii Sports. If they had simply stuck to the control pattern of Wii Sports, I think this game would have done much better because it would have been an actual improvement upon the original and not simply a rehash with inferior controls. Overall, I'm going to give this a yellow card, something that you should potentially avoid. The next game on our review is the Brunswick Pro Bowling. Now this game was actually being developed for the PS2 and the PSP in tandem with the Wii release. And I have to honestly believe that it was kind of shoehorned onto the system with some really last-minute waggle controls to kind of capitalize on the runaway success of the Wii. So the real problem with this game is it has realistic physics. But the controls, as I said for the Wii, are terrible. In fact, to shift from the boards, moving left to right, as something that you do very naturally in a game of Wii Sports Bowling, you actually have to hold the B button trigger and rotate your remote left to right. And it's sometimes very clunky because you can't get exactly the position you want without doing a little, back and forth. And then you actually control the angle of your throw by using the left and right on the D-pad. Now it still uses the standard hold the B and swing in order to get the ball, but I found that my scores were really low, and I have to think that on some level maybe that's just because I'm not very good at real life bowling, and this game really does have a good physics engine, because it was praised for its physics engine. The other interesting factor here is that it has a career mode where you have 9 playable bowlers right off the bat, but then you yourself could design your own bowler. My only issue though is that initially your design options are very limited in the character creation screen. I was not really feeling like I could design someone who looked uniquely like me or was a decent representation of me. In this career mode, you had tournament structures where you would eventually win money, and you could use this money, this in-game currency, to buy upgrades for your character in the form of hats, shirts, pants, shoes, balls, so on and so forth. Overall, I would say this game is okay and doesn't really have any major sins to it other than that annoying control feature I was talking about where I had to hold the B and rotate my wrist in order to find my position on the boards. I still think though that me personally, I'll stick with my Wii Sports Bowling over Brunswick Pro Bowling. The next game in the review is AMF Bowling World Lanes. Now this was a sequel to AMF Pin Busters, which came out about a year after that game. And it's a sequel to a mediocre game in the first place that's even worse than the original. Let's start by talking about the god-awful select screens that really look like something you would never expect on a game that was made by a major publisher. It also has 12 unique playable characters that are all stereotypes of different world ethnicities. Like, for example, a Scottish character who wears a kilt while he plays. And you have 8 unique playable locations which are supposed to be bowling lanes from around the world that are supposed to be uniquely themed and whatnot, but they're not. The mini games are terrible, the controls are terrible. Ultimately, this is the first game on our review that I'm giving an absolute red card to. Do not play this game. Do not buy this game. If someone gives it to you, question your friendship with that person, because ultimately this game is trash and it is the epitome of shovelware on this platform. The next game up on the review is 10 Pin Alley 2, which holds kind of a dubious distinction, as originally it was a Game Boy Advance game, and it shows. This game originally came out in 2004 and then was ported to the Wii in 2008. It has 9 unique playable characters, which kind of fitting pattern you're seeing with these games are all really bad and stereotypical. They run the gambit from Funkmaster Jones to Big Rhonda. And each character has 2 unique outfits that they can swap between, and they can be, left or right-handed, fitting with the particular play style of the player themselves. And you have a number of unlockable balls which have different effects depending on what the ball was designed to do. There are 6 skinned playing venues that you can play at, and there is a kind of a unique feature is that you can adjust your opponent's skill level in a sliding scale pattern. And I kind of liked that feature. It's something that you don't necessarily see easily on the other bowling games on this console. But a major negative, in my opinion, was the zooming, where when you tried to zoom, you actually had to physically hold the up button on the D-pad in order to zoom in, and the zoom was very bad. The camera was just god-awful. Ultimately, though, I'm going to give this game a rating of a yellow card, as I think it's a game that should be avoided. It does not have enough unique qualities to supplant the Wii Sports Bowling as the premier bowling title on this console. The next game on the review is Midnight Bowling, which originally came out in 2005 as a mobile game and was ported in 2008 onto the Wii Shop channel for the Nintendo Wii. This game has your standard single play and multiplayer options, as well as a unique story mode, where players could compete against each other on a board game-esque fashion in order to complete a race to the end faster than the others by simply bowling better than everyone else. Unfortunately, the controls for this game are god-awful, and I don't think the unique play modes make up for it. And the other major issue is that since this game was only available on the Wii Shop channel, which is now of course defunct, it's pretty much impossible to get your hands on this unless you happen to be lucky enough to find a Wii console out there with it already preloaded. If you do, consider yourself lucky, because I think it is worth a look. But again, I don't think it can replace the unique qualities of the classic Wii Sports Bowling. So the next game on our review is from 2009, and that is Alien Monster Bowling League, or AMBL. Now don't let this interesting cover confuse you, it's not a very good game. Let's start with the beginning here. When you first start off, you're going to have 4 characters to choose from, and with 11 unlockables that presumably you would be able to play with if you're moving up in the game. Now, unfortunately, or strangely, I don't know really what to classify it as, none of these 4 characters are either monsters or aliens. They're regular humans, one being a surfer dude, another one being a well-endowed female. There is an interesting factor that your characters all have power moves, and you're going to fill your power gauge and eventually be able to release these power moves, which essentially are just automatic strikes. By holding the A and B button simultaneously, you'll use your power move and you'll automatically throw a strike. So that's kind of interesting. It adds an interesting spin on the game. But another interesting feature of this game is the tilt feature, where sometimes you're going to be offered the option to kind of shake the whole game environment in order to knock down errant pins. Kind of adds like a pinball meets bowling kind of aspect to the game. Major negatives though are there is 0 zoom ability. You cannot zoom in at all, and you're kind of having to always look at the bottom right hand corner to see which pins are still standing in order to line up your shots perfectly. Another really annoying feature of this game, or lack of a feature if you want to call it that, is an inability to actually quit in the middle of a game. You can't go back to the title screen at all. Once you have selected your game and now you're playing, you're stuck with it. There's also no play environments that are initially unlocked that are alien or monster environments. You have like Vietnam, and New York City as options. Very strange. Overall, I found the most annoying factor of this game though to be this power gauge, which after an hour and a half of trying to learn how to play this game, I still hadn't mastered. And I was just seemingly throwing the ball at full power each time, which I think is kind of weird because I feel like most of the time you're gonna want to throw the ball at full power anyway. Can't really see any strategic reason to throw it with less power. Of course, I'm not a professional bowler, so I can't really tell you the ins and outs of throwing the ball with less speed. I would give this game a solid red card because ultimately the controls are terrible and it does not give you a full game. As soon as you put the disc into your system, you have to unlock most of the features of the game, and I feel like in order to unlock them, you're gonna have to slog through hours and hours of bad gameplay, and really, it's like picking fly shit out of pepper. If you accomplish it, you really wonder why you wasted so much time, and it's not like you really have a product you want to use anyway. The next game in review is Brunswick Zone Cosmic Bowling, which came out in 2010. Now this game was about $50 to $60 at retail and actually included a $20 voucher for the Brunswick Zone Bowling. I'm not completely familiar with Brunswick Zone. I assume it was a chain of bowling alleys that were nowhere near me. So I have no idea if they were good bowling alleys, so I certainly didn't get to use that coupon at any point in time. This is, of course, the sequel to Brunswick Pro Bowling, and while that game had difficult controls but really good physics, this game had really easy controls and really bad physics. Pro is that it actually allowed you to use the Wii Motion Plus, but you really didn't need the Wii Motion Plus because ultimately you're going to roll damn near a perfect game every single time. My first time out, with literally no effort given by myself at all, I rolled a 255, and I wasn't even trying. And I'm not a very good bowler, I can assure you. Another major factor to this game being bad is the character design window, where you don't get to make me's or realistic avatars of real people, or even cartoon stereotypes of real people. You simply have these weird Mr. Potato Head, Jelly Bean Man, Eminem caricature kind of people, and it's really nightmare fuel if you ask me. I cannot stress how jarring the character design in this game is. The mini games are terrible, the select screens are terrible, there is really no redeeming qualities for this game whatsoever, so I have to absolutely give it a red card, meaning you should avoid it like the plague. The most redeeming quality of this game was the $20 voucher, and as I said, I don't actually know anywhere you could have redeemed this, and I'm sure if you do find a coupon in your copy, it would have expired by now and is non-redeemable. So I saved the very best for last, and anyone who knows anything about the Nintendo Wii should have no surprise here that the best version of bowling on the Nintendo Wii is part of the 12-sport compilation Wii Sports Resort. Now, this was the direct sequel to Wii Sports, and it really shows, as it was made by Nintendo themselves. It took everything from that Wii Sports title and really just improved upon it. In fact, it introduced new play features like a 100-pin version of the game, as well as a spin control version where you had to avoid obstacles in order to get a strike or a spare. Ultimately, I think this is the only version of Wii Bowling that is worth playing. And if you have a chance to get this at a good price, I recommend you do. So in conclusion, the Wii really does have a lot of shovelware with respect to bowling games. And the only bowling game that is superior to the original is the Wii Sports Resort version. And that's why I recommend, if you can, to pick up a copy of Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort in a compilation disc. This was a pack-in title that came with the console later on in the lifespan of the Wii. And so these are becoming harder and harder to find. So if you can scoop it up for a good price, I recommend you do. good price being anything under $30. If you really enjoyed this video, please do me a favor and clickety-clack that like button and pound that big red subscribe button to help boost up the channel. And also, while you're at it, ring a ding-ding that notification bell, because we are going to be putting more videos up on this channel. We're going to be running through the entirety of the Wii Sports library, identifying each of the 5 sports and looking at every single version of that sport that was available on the Wii and the various games that it supported. So guys, I'm Dominic, the Wii Referee. Thank you for watching and looking forward to seeing you next time.